Is this the year Japan wins the Kentucky Derby? Let's talk about it on this video breakdown. Salutations and welcome, friends. I'm your host of this very special Trust the Process video. My name is Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. Now, before we get any further, make sure to press that subscribe button here on YouTube to make sure to get all of our content on Trust the Profits, whether it's these sorts of Kentucky Derby videos, whether it's countdown videos, whether it's spotlight series, whether it's graded stakes previews, whether it's capping the card, doubling down, live betting, international race coverage. We got it all right here. Your one-stop shop for everything you need to know for horse racing as we go into this year's Run for the Roses and Run for the Triple Crown. Now, make sure to also throw me a follow on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. Make sure to like this video and comment below with what your thoughts are on the Japanese contingent coming to Churchill Downs this year's Kentucky Derby on May 6th. And what do you think their chances are in this particular race? This is the main focus of this video. And we are going to talk about whether or not this is the year Japan is able to break through and win the Kentucky Derby. We've seen them have breakthroughs in the years leading up to this. We've seen 2 years ago at Del Mar in the Breeders' Cup, 2 Japanese horses winning Breeders' Cup races. And the dialogue before then was the Japanese have never won. The Japanese have never won. The best finish was a 4th, but so on and so forth. What did they show? They showed the trend line of history is moving in a very upward direction for the Chinese horses. Is the same thing true here at Churchill Downs as we approach the first Saturday in May? Well, let's talk about it because we have a few different horses in this particular field. It's not just about one particular horse. It's about multiple horses, and it's about thinking through why Japan might just have a chance to upset international horse racing, upset certainly North American horse racing, and upset the blue bloods of the sport, something I would love so much to see. Because again, if you've listened to me talk about the Japanese, they have been doing things the right way over there. They have been breeding the right way. They have been growing the sport the right way. They seem to be doing the inverse of everything we have been doing here in the United States. So this might be the wake-up call that is very necessary for American horse racing to have once they lose the elusive Kentucky Derby, especially in the heart of blue blood territory in the bluegrass state of Kentucky. So let's talk a little bit about it. Will Japan win this year's Kentucky Derby? Obviously, Derma Sotogake, pictured here on the left, is the winner of the UAE Derby. And really, in many ways, people, I think, are identifying him as the lead contingent of this Japanese trio of horses that may very well end up running in the Kentucky Derby. And I say may end up because of Mandarin Hero. Mandarin Hero right now is the 24th horse in the Kentucky Derby. Now, the problem is they only run 20 of them. So there's going to need to be a few scratches to take place or a few horses defecting from the race before the post draw for Mandarin Hero to have a shot at getting into the race. But let's talk about these 3 horses because Mandarin Hero, even though he's not going to the Kentucky Derby potentially, his connections have said they are going to go to the Preakness if they don't draw into the Kentucky Derby field. So he is going to be on the Triple Crown trail. So let's just be very upfront about that right at the get-go. But let's start with Mandarin Hero, who's probably the least well-known out of these 3 horses. 6 career races, 4 wins, 2 seconds. And this was a horse that was running on what is often considered the lower level circuit in Japan. So Japan has 2 different circuits. They have the Japanese Racing Association, and then they have the National Association of Racing, the NAR. He was running on the NAR tracks. The JRA tracks are the high-level tracks. Now, I've used this comparison before, but this is if you're first time watching. The comparison I make is think of like California, for instance. Mandarin Hero was running at the equivalent of like Golden Gate or Los Alamitos, whereas Continuar and Derma Sotogake were running at the equivalent of Santa Anita and Del Mar. They were running at the A-level tracks, and Mandarin Hero was running at the B-level tracks. Not to say there's not good competition at those B-level tracks, but traditionally we've not seen that. So Mandarin Hero in the Japan was 4 for 5. He makes a very shocking announcement. Trainer Fujita makes a very shocking announcement that they're coming over to run in the Santa Anita Derby. This was a shocking development to see a Japanese horse coming over to North America and participating in the Derby Trail through the American route. Oftentimes, Japanese horses will go through the Middle East. They'll go to Maidan, as Continuar and Derma Sotogake did. Mandarin Hero goes to Santa Anita. 8-1 morning line was, I believe, the fourth or fifth choice on the board at that point. I think with the scratch of Go Rocket Ride, he ended up being the fourth choice that particular day. Ends up running a very, very, very game second place in the Santa Anita Derby, beating a lot of really good horses, beating a horse like National Treasure, beating a horse like Skinner, beating some nice American horses, and just barely, barely losing to Practical Move, who was the winner. This is a horse that has the experience of running in the United States, running over that surface. Also was already here in the United States. He already did the long transit from Japan to California before the race. And oh, by the way, he only came over a week or so, 10 days before the race. He only got one workout in over that Santa Anita surface. It was a very slow 53-2 4 furlong workout. Then he comes and is a horse that comes from off the pace on a speed favoring track and still almost wins the Santa Anita Derby. Absolutely incredible effort for a horse that, like I said, had been running at the second tiered level in Japan. But that's not new, because we've seen a horse like Marche Lorraine, who won the Distaff 2 years ago out in Del Mar, also had been running on that lower level circuit. The horse that won the Dubai World Cup. Oh, by the way, Ushba Tesoro, that horse had been running on the secondary circuit over in Japan as well. So these secondary circuit Japanese horses have been winning and running very well in these big races. Mandarin Hero, very legitimate horse, a horse that likes to come from off the pace, doesn't like to have a little bit of pace to run into, but certainly a very formidable horse that's never been outside the exacta. Now, Continuar is a very interesting horse. This is a horse trained by a Japanese legend, Yoshida Yahagi, incredible trainer, and one of the greats, and the trainer of Love's Only You, who was a huge winner at that 2021 Breeders' Cup at Del Mar. Continuar, 5 career races, 2 wins, 1 second, 1 third. Here's the thing about Continuar. Very strong 2-year-old campaign, has come back as a 3-year-old, not maybe quite as strong. This is a horse that finished basically 5th first time out and 3rd last time out in that UAE Derby, losing to Derma Sotogake. Had lost to Derma Sotogake once before in an allowance level race, but had won the Catalia Stakes. The Catalia Stakes was actually a Kentucky Derby prep race in Japan. Earned Kentucky Derby points through that race. He's got a veteran team around him. Yahagi is one of the absolute best in terms of getting these horses ready and prepared. Both Continuar and Derma Sotogake are already at Churchill Downs, have already been working out over the Churchill Downs surface. Like I said, very legitimate horse there. And then you have Derma, who is one of the most exciting horses, I think, in this year's Kentucky Derby field. 8 victories, 4 wins, 2 thirds. Here's the thing about Derma. This is a horse that has dirt pedigree for days, but they ran on turf the first 2 times out. In a lot of ways, if we were looking at this horse from an American perspective, you were looking at the PPs, what do? You cross a line through the first 2 efforts. So you cross a line through the first 2 efforts, suddenly this horse is 6 career efforts, 4 wins, 2 seconds. That looks a whole heck of a lot better. This horse broke his maiden on the dirt, has won going longer and longer distances, 1,800 meters, 1,900 meters. This horse likes going longer, seems to get stronger going longer, won the UAE Derby, and he's versatile. Everybody saw that UAE Derby and assumed, oh, Derma Sotogake is a horse that likes to go to the lead. He's a need the lead type of horse. He's going to be just like Crown Pride and get burned up by this fast pace. Those people don't watch race replays. If you watch race replays, you know that Derma Sotogake sits mid-pack a lot of times. He's a super versatile horse that can come from well off the pace. He can stalk. He can be on the lead. It was not his intent to be on the lead that day, according to his trainer. It just worked out that way because there was not a lot of pace in that particular race. So Derma can sit a lot of different trips at the Kentucky Derby. That versatility makes him very dangerous. Now, that said, listen, I gave you maybe a rose-tinted version of these three entrants, but there is some absolute history against them as it goes into the Kentucky Derby. Japanese horses are 0 for 2 in the Kentucky Derby. Of course, Crown Pride last year, finishing 13th, getting just absolutely burned up by that insane pace set by Summer Is Tomorrow and Crown Pride out front in the Kentucky Derby last year. Additionally, UAE Derby winners, when they come over to the Kentucky Derby, are 0 for 18. That is not a good record, folks. There's a lot of strenuous travel. Remember, these horses went from Japan to Maidan and now came to Louisville. And it was not a direct flight from Maidan to Louisville. There were a lot of stops along the way. I believe they ended up in Amsterdam at one point. I think London, maybe New York, and then finally Louisville. It was a 4 or 5 stop trip from Maidan over here to Louisville, Kentucky for the Churchill Downs and the Kentucky Derby. So it's a strenuous travel. Now, they have been over here for a few weeks. That basically they're here for a month or so before the race. So they have some time to acclimate, but still, that's a strenuous travel on these horses. And no horse that won the UAE Derby has ever done this before. There's also always questions about the level of competition and the running style. I think I made this point last because I feel like this is a point being made by a lot of people who are very ethnocentric with their focus on North American racing. If you follow Japanese racing, the level of competition, guess what? It's gotten better and better and better. And that should only be honestly exemplified by how well Mandarin Hero did out in California against the Santa Anita Derby field. That their lower level horses are good enough to hit the board at the Santa Anita Derby. So what's their upper level horse going to do? Those are, I think, very legitimate questions to be asking. I think there's also a misperception because of what happened last year with Crown Pride and with some of these other UAE Derby winners that all of these horses are just front end speed horses, kind of what they were referred to as kind of quote unquote cheap speed up front. I never liked that phrase, but that kind of just flash in the pan speed up front. That's not true, though. Derma does not have that type of running style. Continuar does not have that type of running style. Mandarin Hero does not have that type of running style. None of these horses are need-to-lead horses. Derma is probably the most versatile in terms of going up there and can stalk and press and sit a little bit closer. But Continuar and Mandarin Hero are stone-cold closers in a lot of instances, or at the very least, mid-pack horses. So again, the level of competition, I think, has only increased over the last 5 to 10 years. The running style is something that I think a lot of people, again, are just using last year as, oh, the Japanese horse, they're going to go out in front. Derma had his first workout over the Churchill Downs surface. What did he do? 49 and change for a furlong workout. It's not a forwardly placed workout. You go back, you look at Crown Pride's workouts last year, they're all 47 and change. They're all very fast, aggressive bullet works that he's putting out there. Derma, not the same way. Again, every year is a little bit different. So why is there a reason for optimism? Well, I mentioned the trend line of history. Japan, over the last several years, has started to dominate these international race days in Maidan, in Saudi Arabia, where they have been able to win consistently on the turf and the dirt, sprinting, routing, and they've been doing it in the big money events. They're obviously coming over, had a huge amount of success 2 years ago at Del Mar in the Breeders' Cup with 2 wins in the distaff and then in the turf. And that was, like I said, just the kind of tip of the iceberg to some extent. And this past year, they didn't come over to Keeneland because the travel is a lot for horses coming over, especially to the Midwest of the United States. I would expect a lot of Japanese horses in this year's Breeders' Cup at Santa Anita. Also, it's important to point out there's a ton of money to be won in Asian racing. So we tend to think the Breeders' Cup is this huge draw. The reality is there's huge Grade 1 races and Group 1 races over in Japan, over in Hong Kong, over in China that are for just as much purse money, if not more purse money, than what they'd be running for here in the United States. So they've been dominant in these other international settings. And I think there's a reason to think that they can continue to be dominant in Louisville and at Churchill Downs. The other concept here is every year is different. And this is kind of a blackjack concept. This is why when you go to a Vegas hotel, they always have the board next to the, I shouldn't say blackjack, I meant roulette, roulette concept. In roulette, they have the board that shows how many, what they've rolled, spun the last 10 times out, 15 times out. And inevitably, you'll see or be with someone who goes, oh, you see that roulette wheel? they've run, they've spun 10 straight blacks. I'm going to go over there and put my money on red, or I'm going to go over there and put my money on black. Every single spin is independent to every single other spin. Just because there have been 10 straight blacks doesn't mean there'll be 11. It also doesn't mean the next one's going to be red. Every single spin is independent to every single other spin. Every year is different. Dynamics are different. The horses are different. The trainers are different. The fields are different. Every year is different. So treating Japan and treating the UAE Derby winner with this broad brush of, well, they've never won, so they never will win, is exactly the sort of concept that you would see at a roulette wheel where they go, well, they've gone 18 straight blacks in a row. Reds must never have a chance of getting rolled here. Eventually, there's going to be a red. Just the law of large numbers indicates that eventually a red will be rolled. Doesn't mean it's going to happen in the next spin, but eventually there's going to be a red number it lands on. I do think this year the Derby field is susceptible. I think this is a weaker crop. I don't think there's a dominant horse. I like Forte very much as a horse, but I don't think he's a dominant horse. This is a crop that has beaten each other in different prep races, taken turns, taking a step forward and taking a step back, I feel like. I don't feel like there's been an overwhelming horse in this particular year's crop. I think that that's exemplified by the fact that outside of California, only 2 fills has actually broken a 100 buyer speed figure as a 3-year-old. There's a lot of horses that are running around the same level. And I also think the pace should set up nicely, that there's going to be an honest pace, but not a lot of pace. Jace's Road just drew into this field, so he's going to add to that pace up front, but it's not going to be like last year. There's not going to be 12 horses gunning for the lead like there was last year. There's going to be 3 or 4 who go out in front. There's going to be 4 or 5 who stalk and press. There'll be another 3 or 4 who are sitting mid-pack, and then there's going to be some horses that are closers. And it's going to be a pretty evenly divided field between those. And you kind of know where everybody's going to be. And the pace will be decent, but it's not going to be suicidal. And I think that honest sort of setup means that a horse like Derma Sotogake, for instance, can sit a really nice trip, sitting 3rd, 4th early on and being well in position to go. This is a horse that absolutely likes the more distance you give this horse. It's not surprising that once they started stretching this horse out, that's when this horse actually had the most success. So ultimately, will Japan win this year's Kentucky Derby? Well, still give me another week or so to determine whether or not Derma will be my top pick, but I'm certainly trending that way. And if I was a betting man, if there was a futures bet, if you took a bet with a friend that said in the next 5 years a Japanese horse is going to win the Kentucky Derby, I would absolutely say yes to that. I think that is the direction we are headed as a sport, and I don't think it's a bad thing that the Kentucky Derby becomes a little bit more international in focus. I think these Japanese horses mean business. These trainers know what they're doing. These horses have been bred for the dirt. This is what makes it so different from Europe. And I think, again, why Americans struggle with this concept a little bit, because we've seen in some instances horses that are really traditionally turf horses, when the UAE Derby come over here, run on the dirt and not run well. It's different when the Europeans do it, because the Europeans are breeding for turf in most cases. Europeans don't breed for dirt. The Japanese are breeding for dirt. They are breeding. Everybody's related to Sunday Silence. They are breeding for this dirt, okay? They are trying to get better and better and better dirt horses. Just look at who they are buying as brood mares. Look at who they are bringing over as stallions. Hot Rod Charlie. They're bringing over, Firenze Fire. These are dirt horses, okay? They are breeding for this. This is their progression. This is the next natural step in horse racing. Are they going to win it this year? You know something? I was going to hedge a little bit, but I'm not going to anymore. Yes, Japan is going to win the 2023 Kentucky Derby. Well, that's my hot take for the day. Tune back for some more content here on Trust the Profits. Make sure to give me a follow on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. Comment below with why you think I'm absolutely crazy for supporting a Japanese horse in this year's Kentucky Derby, or why you're going to be joining with me rooting on the land of the rising sun. Until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.